All right, welcome back for what I hope is going to be a glitch-free, you know, recording, which will actually sync up for once. If not, guys, I'm trying the best I can. Trust me. Okay, so we're going to be covering Chapter 6 of The Great Gatsby today, which this will be for the next week. The last week we're going to be working on The Great Gatsby before we turn our attention to early writings of the founding fathers and the other people who kind of were around the U.S. when it began. And we're going to start discussing the American dream in a more historical context. But today, we're going to tackle kind of what do we call a tweener chapter, as this chapter doesn't have a lot as far as the plot points that are important, but has a couple of important details as we transition into the second half and build towards our climax. So this is kind of an in-between section, which doesn't make it any less important, all right? So first off, we're going to get the background of Jay Gatsby, the real background, okay? Started with his real name, which is Jay Gatz, not Gatsby. Now, the significance of the change in his name is probably to distance himself from not only the family that he is embarrassed of, but also to change the ethnic quality of his name, because that probably was a big deal to him, especially back in the 20s when there was still a lot of prejudice against not only other colored races, but also of the white people didn't like certain other white people. So we see a lot of that kind of thing going on this time period. So the change from Gats with a Z to Gatsby with an S is probably a move like that. We found out his parents are actually poor farmers from North Dakota, of all places, and Gatsby was embarrassed by them and never really accepted them for who they were or what they were. So he invents this persona and dreams of great riches, and it's the American dream. You know, you start out as a poor person and you dream one day of having all this other stuff. Some of us dream a little bigger than others, and Gatsby's dreams are huge, obviously. So, in fact, let's get some of that brilliant prose that Fitzgerald gives us that really sums up the restlessness of Gatsby. So it says, a universe of ineffable gaudiness spun itself out in his brain while the clock ticked on the washstand and the moon soaked with wet light his tangled clothes upon the floor. Each night he added to the pattern of his fancies until drowsiness closed down upon some vivid scene with an oblivious embrace. For a while, these reveries provided an outlet for his imagination. They were a satisfactory hint of the unreality of reality, a promise that the rock of the world was founded securely on a fairy's wing. Now, again, that is a really powerful passage as far as so much beauty contained in it. I mean, yes, you could easily say that he dreamed big and, really, saw the world as this magical place, or at least felt like his place was magical, where he was going. But, why just say it simply when you can, if you're talented enough to do it the way that Fitzgerald was? I mean, Fitzgerald was writing a book to be remembered. It was not about let's entertain some people and make some money. It was about lasting, and prose like that lasts, okay? So we also find out here about, I've mentioned to you guys in class that Gatsby actually earned his money twice. The first time is with this interaction he has with a very super wealthy man named Dan Cody, who owns a yacht. And Gatsby kind of works his way into a job using his charm and charisma. And he works for Dan Cody for 5 years, sailing around the continent and just being basically an assistant, but helping him out. Well, Cody eventually mysteriously dies when a suspicious, I think they said she was a reporter, named Ella Kay shows up. She appears and decides to ride with them on the boat, and a week later, Cody's dead. So that enough makes her seem shady, but Dan Cody left Gatsby a huge sum of that time, and even today, $25,000 is a lot of money, but I forgot to do the research before I looked at this, but we'll probably talk about it in class, what that translates to with inflation today. But let's just say it would have been enough for Gatsby to really have a great start to a new life. But Ella Kay finds a way to make sure he does not get that money. She ties it up with lawyers, and she is able to add his $25,000 to the millions she's getting from the death of poor Dan Cody, who I would imagine was murdered by this woman somehow. How they didn't get suspicious about this, I'll never know. But Gatsby does not receive the money, but what he does receive is some really important information about the fairness of life, and realizes that you can work super hard and do everything you can to earn your money the right way and still not get it. And this is like supposed to be Fitzgerald's comment, at least one of them, on the American dream. The idea is you can work as hard as you want and still come up short. And that's a problem. This is really what pushes Gatsby to take the next stage of his life, which will be to become a bootlegger and a criminal. Um, so the next part, this section is really into two pieces. One is that part we just covered. The second part is going to be about this, and I don't understand how this works. Maybe this is just a rich people thing, but apparently Tom and the Sloanes, they're another couple that they're very minor characters. They only are in this section, but they show up at Gatsby's house for drinks. They just show up uninvited, and none of these people are Gatsby's friends. If you can't tell by how they behave, which seems like really poor behavior on my part, but I don't know. So when they show up, what we really need this scene for, this may just be awkward writing on Fitzgerald's part, to be honest, but what we really need this scene for is two reasons. One, for plot, we need to see that Gatsby is now comfortable around Tom. Remember when he was first introduced to him by Nick earlier in the book, he didn't seem so excited about meeting him, and he even kind of awkwardly exits. And now he's not that nervous around Tom because he feels like he's got one up on Tom. He feels like I'm going to end up with your woman. So I now am the bigger man in the room, and he feels a lot tougher. But for some reason, the Sloanes do. I think it's Miss Sloane does this, typical thing we see people do all the time, where she invites Gatsby to come with them to lunch, even though she's assuming he's going to say no, or at least that's what they're hoping. And Gatsby says yes out of the blue, and he even wants Nick to come with him. So he runs off to get his stuff, and then they're going to ditch him like they're ditching their little brother at a party. It's really awkward. But besides the awkwardness, look at these statements that are made. This is Tom talking. He says, "My God, I believe the man's coming," said Tom. "Doesn't he know she doesn't want him?" "Well, she says she does want him. She has a big dinner party, and he won't know a soul there." He frowned. "I wonder where in the devil he met Daisy. By God, I may be old-fashioned in my ideas, but women run around too much these days to suit me. They meet all kinds of crazy fish." So look, we actually can play with a little bit of dramatic irony here. And when they're talking about Miss Sloane, or Mr. Sloane says, "Well, she said she did want him," and Tom's saying, "Well, no, she doesn't." That could easily parallel to Tom's own wife, Daisy, because, Tom would think Daisy would never associate with a man like this, but it seems like she, in fact, does. Tom can't understand why someone would associate with someone who's what he considers lower class, which is really the major problem we deal with. One of the major problems we deal with in this book. And then the second part about Tom saying he thinks women run around too much is kind of funny, considering Tom's a cheater himself. So got a little bit of irony there. And then we transition to, I think it's a little bit of time passes, and then Gatsby's having another one of his parties, and Daisy actually comes to this one, and she brings Tom, which, now, what a weird situation, because, she's probably, we can assume that her and Gatsby kind of are a thing right now. And then now she brings her husband and puts him right in the middle of this. And just judging by Tom's comments about, I wonder how he met Daisy, and then the way he behaves at the party, we already see the suspicion bubbling over Tom. So let's see if there was anything interesting here. The fact when Tom shows up, let me read you a couple of little short sentences here. It says, the following Saturday night, he came with her to Gatsby's party, he being Tom. It says, perhaps his presence gave the evening its peculiar quality of oppressiveness. So again, that's like a very common thing. Remember when we saw Tom first appear, and when he entered a room, everyone kind of deflated? Well, now we get this image that he enters a room and it becomes oppressive. We also get, I felt an unpleasantness in the air, a pervading harshness that hadn't been there before. So unpleasant and harsh, again, things that we could easily associate with Tom, plus the awkwardness that's going to occur here. Then you get the last line here. It says, it's invariably saddening to look through new eyes at things upon which you have expended your own powers of adjustment. So we get this image of this was Nick looking at things from Daisy's perspective and realizing that this is kind of a bad situation. Then we get Tom's arrogant eyes roam the crowd, which is, again, more of just Fitzgerald making sure we understand that Tom is not a guy we want to like. Then there's this little bit of gamesmanship as Gatsby refers to Tom as the polo player, which is really trivializing him by taking his name away and making him more about what he does. And Tom even notices that and says he doesn't like being referred to as that. The next part in this part, there's a lot of good imagery that's worth reading. But then the next really big part that I want to discuss with you guys occurs a few pages later when Daisy is commenting on the party. And to be honest with you, I've read this book multiple times into double digits now. And when I was prepping this for you guys, something clicked with me about this. And this is the beauty of literature. When you read it more and more and more, things become more and more alive for you, to be honest. So listen to what Daisy says. They're talking about the party itself. It says the rest offended her, and inarguably because it wasn't a gesture but an emotion. She was appalled by West Egg, this unprecedented place that Broadway had begotten upon a Long Island fishing village, appalled by its raw vigor that chafed under the old euphemisms, and by the too obtrusive fate that herded its inhabitants along a shortcut from nothing to nothing. She saw something awful in the very simplicity she failed to understand. So for some reason, she's repulsed by West Egg and everything that it represents. But in all honesty, there's something else bothering Daisy at this point. And I think this is one of the things we see, the reasons why the rich in this book hate people from West Egg so much. It's because they represent everything that the East Eggers can't have. Think about it. The new money people have the same amount of money as the old money people. But the difference is new money people can do whatever they want. And the old money people are still bound by these old strictures and guidelines. And it's repulsive to them to see somebody who doesn't have to abide by those. It's jealousy. And I don't know if they even recognize it, but that's really what it comes down to. All right. So Daisy seems pretty upset. We also find out at this point that Tom is obsessed with finding out who Gatsby truly is and how he earned his money. Because again, that's important to Tom so that he can in some way make Gatsby look like a fraud. Tom nails what he does when he says that he heard that all these new money people are bootleggers, and Gatsby most definitely is. So as the party ends, you see Gatsby going back to his kind of awkward stage as he's just so upset. He thinks that Daisy didn't enjoy the party, and he's just fraught about this. He's so upset that she didn't like, or he thinks she didn't like the party, and Nick tries to assure him that she did. But then, oh man, then the last little bit of this is one of the passages that, again, you've got to nail. They're one of the ones, there's a couple lines in here which, even if you're not a big reading analyst, you probably highlighted these. All right. So I love this line by Gatsby. This isn't one of the lines I would have thought. He says, "Old sport, the dance is unimportant." He wanted nothing less of Daisy than that she should go to Tom and say, "I never loved you." After she had obliterated 4 years with that sentence, they could decide upon the more practical measures to be taken. One of them was, after she was free, they were to go back to Louisville and be married from her house, just as if it were 5 years ago. "And she doesn't understand," he said. "She used to be able to understand. We'd sit for hours." He broke off and began to walk up and down a desolate path of fruit rinds and discarded favors and crushed flowers. "I wouldn't ask too much of her," I ventured. "You can't repeat the past." "Can't repeat the past?" he cried incredulously. "Why, of course you can." See, now there is Gatsby's downfall. That is the spot where we see what really is bothering him. See, Gatsby wants Daisy to abandon the last 4 years of her life because he hasn't been living his life. He's been purely focused on getting her, and he wants that to be the romantic image of that's what she wanted to. He wants her to be able to go back to Louisville and rub it in everyone's faces that they're together, and wants to recapture that time. And Nick sees this, and he's like, "Look, man, you don't need to expect too much from Daisy." I mean, the fact is that he's got Daisy. Honestly, if we leave things the way they are, she probably, well, I don't know. She might run off with him. It just depends on if she's willing to abandon, her persona and who she claims to be. But he has that option. And then instead, he wants something that's just not possible. You can't undo the past, and that's what he's expecting. And it's just not going to work. Says, "I'm going to fix everything just the way it was before," he said, nodding determinedly. "She'll see." He talked a lot about the past, and I gathered that he wanted to recover something, some idea of himself perhaps, that had gone into loving Daisy. His life had been confused and disordered since then, but if he could only once return to a certain starting place and go over it all slowly, he could find out what that thing was. So we get this idea that Gatsby is missing what he used to be, and now that he's become a criminal and his life has gone off the rails in some ways, it's like he wants to go back to a simpler time. And as an adult, let me tell you something, we do that a lot. We want things to go back to a simpler time before just life complicated everything. And Gatsby is a romantic person, okay? He really is. He can be creepy at times too, but he definitely has this idea of romance nailed down with the love at first sight, and everything's going to be great. And he really just wants a chance to recapture that. And that's how we end chapter 6. Okay. And like I said, chapter 7 is going to start a real mood shift in this as things move into the affair between Gatsby and Daisy continuing, and then some other problems developing. Tom continues pushing, and we're going to see things get to the head of where we're going to return to the Valley of Ashes for something very tragic. So I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. I hope that you're doing okay. I know the first few classes where we've discussed this, we've had mixed results. Some of you seem to be really absorbing this and getting into it. Some of you seem like you're deer in the headlights and just don't care. So we need to figure out what will and won't work for you guys. So hopefully these videos are helping. This was relatively short. I tried to keep it under 20 minutes, and we definitely are going to achieve that. So have a wonderful evening, and hopefully this will work. And then when we come back for chapter 7, you'll be ready to see where we're going. So talk to you guys again very soon.